I finally found the time to do something that I really don't have enough time to do, and that was to actually sit through an anime series. Now, I it took way longer than it probably should because, this is 2 seasons, about 22 episodes of a Netflix series. It I am trying to do my best to read more books, watch more anime, watch more movies. And I do think with the way my schedule is laid out that I will be accomplishing that. So hopefully in the future I will be able to get through more series and accomplish more stuff. So yeah, today's episode of the Harmon Smith review show is regarding Kinnikuman, the Perfect Origin arc, which is not the start of the series. I think that's very important to point out because I went into this knowing nothing about the setting, the characters, the setup. I had some vague recollection of seeing advertisements for Ultimate Muscle back in the day, which is actually a sequel series to this. So, from what I understand, there are two parts of Kinnikuman, like a sequel series and the original, and this is a adaptation of one of the arcs in the original series. So it technically takes place before Ultimate Muscle if you grew up watching that. And going into this, I wasn't really sure what to expect from it because I remember I never ever watched a thing from Ultimate Muscle because I saw the ads and the promotion for it and thought it looked really dumb. I hated the toilet humor and all of that, and the idea of some coward getting in the ring and wrestling. It just didn't make any sense to me as a concept. And if you know anything about me, I didn't grow up with wrestling or wrestling culture at all. So for me, the show just didn't seem to have any real appeal. I'd rather watch TMNT. I'd rather watch anything like Dragon Ball, which I also did not grow up watching. I saw more than this. When it came to Dragon Ball, the reason I couldn't watch that was because of how often they jumped around the timeline and how nothing made any sense. If I watched 2-3 episodes in a row, I would get into it, and then they would go elsewhere in the timeline, and it was just kind of ridiculous. I remember watching the Boo saga when I was super young, and then getting scared by the whole concept of getting absorbed by Boo. And, I made the decision to never actually watch Dragon Ball Z again because I wanted to stick more with, the original Dragon Ball stuff. Because that made sense to me, that, Kid Goku, earlier on in the story, that made more sense to me, personally. I wanted to watch the original Dragon Ball, not Dragon Ball Z for that reason. And obviously, I became a fan of Dragon Ball Z later in life. But it's very interesting kind of seeing how, you kind of get more into these kind of shows as you get older. Because I think the trend with a lot of Western shows I grew up with that I really like, stuff like Danny Phantom, Fairly Odd Parents, Teen Titans, I like them less and less as I get older, while stuff like this I like more and more. And Kinnikuman is very interesting because I had a very bad first impression of it. I actually can't think of any show from any channel or East or West that I had as bad of an impression as this. It's very interesting watching Kinnikuman and realizing that this is a great show. It's very shocking watching that that recap first episode and then going into the setup with the second, getting introduced to characters and the setting and the world. Nothing about it makes any sense. Okay, from what I can gather, and they never really explain this. It's some setting where for some reason there are these superpowered wrestlers that exist and they fight each other and that's their culture or whatever, and people watch it like real wrestling. That's basically what I get. I don't know why these guys are fighting and what they're hoping to accomplish other than their differing ideologies, right? So what ends up happening is these this one faction gets attacked by this other faction, but the good faction, all their guys are in comas from the last encounter they got in. So one guy Terry Mann has to like stand up to like these incredible wrestlers all by himself, and he barely manages to eke out a win against the first guy. He barely manages to win, and then out of nowhere, like some rival faction shows up and they start wrestling. So like for a good like chunk of like the first season, like I would say like over half of it, like you don't even really see the series protagonist. Actually, that's the really weird thing about this. Like it's called Kinnikuman, and it is like ostensibly about Kinnikuman, but like a lot of this is about like the side characters fighting like the antagonists. Like it's very odd. It's kind of the antithesis to Dragon Ball in that way, where it's kind of like Dragon Ball presents it in a way where like only Goku can win fights and only Goku is relevant, and like maybe like you have Vegeta jobbing sometimes, and like the other characters just get instantly wiped, but Goku is like always the one who comes in clutch and wins. Like Kinnikuman's like kind of different in that sense, where it's more like the character is inspiring everyone around him to be better people. And so, like, without even really realizing it, a lot of them are like, start doing his thing of like friendship is power and all that stuff. It's very interesting watching this because it like I was thinking a lot about why I love anime. Watching this, why I love the genre so much, and it's like it's so interesting because I think a lot of normies have this mindset that this kind of thing is cheesy. It's ridiculous, that like you can't take it seriously. And yet like I was watching this and I was kind of thinking that like this is what I want to see out of this kind of thing. Like you have these crazy like people with insane abilities fighting each other, talking about their differing personalities, perspectives, going into their insanely convoluted backstories, which are fairly engaging and well written. There's this one bit where you have this this random Akama Shojin guy, like one of the rival characters. He's going up against another Chojin. And what happens is that this guy is like a heel, right? So like he's a bad guy, traditionally, but like because he's going up against the worst guy, like people start like cheering for him. It's like it's very very interesting to see like how well executed this concept actually is, and how much you kind of just end up loving a lot of these characters, because 2 seasons worth of content where like Kinnikuman doesn't really do all that much at all. And his one fight in this is basically just him cheesing some guy in like the most basic way possible, literally. And it's very engaging, but he doesn't do anything all that technically impressive. But that's kind of the point. Like what you end up getting is a bunch of different characters from a bunch of different backgrounds, just having these like really, really engaging, well-written fights. I was thinking about this when I was watching like my guy Black Hole, my favorite character. His fights are like the best because his moveset's really interesting. The guys he goes up against are just assholes, and he just makes himself look awesome. Like the show does a great job kind of fleshing out these characters that I've never seen before, that in a way that makes you like feel very attached to them and want to see them like succeed, or like not even really succeed, like do their best, because there are plenty of times where like you have characters you really like and want to see win do end up taking massive L's, or end up taking massive end up getting like severely messed up. Like there are lots of examples of this. Like you really get this sense that like the people who made this just love wrestling, and they just love like the exaggerated nature of it, and they really just did something that really just goes far beyond like pretty much what any Western brand would ever be capable of. Like that's the interesting thing about this, is that this random anime, which I'm sure is not like considered the all-time best, still considers to like demolish random like not the very best like the Western world has to offer. You know what I mean? Like I'd much rather watch something like this than like pretty much any Western show ever produced. This is way better than say like Avatar: The Last Airbender or um, any of these other like slop shows you see on on Western networks. Like the difference in quality is just staggering, and I know that's something I say about anime all the time, but like it really does need to be like emphasized. I think whenever like you discover this kind of show because this is something I've never heard of before. This is something I just ended up like watching out of curiosity. And in the end, like, well, I mean, the arc isn't even over yet. I'm sure we're gonna get a season 3. Like in the end, what ended up happening is that the show was mind-blowingly good. Like I loved every second of it. Like it does such a great job at creating this like world and setting and vibe, and you just get excited watching it and watching this the insanity play out. And like it really makes me think just how much like the average Westerner is missing out on if they like refuse to watch anime, because this is the thing you see from a lot of people in their like mid 30s or people who like grew up in that era before like watching anime was socially acceptable. Like a lot of people still refuse to acknowledge that anime is far better than like Western comics, way better than Western animation, way better than like anything the West has ever produced. Like growing up in that period where like people would harass you for like liking Naruto or for for talking about One Piece, like everybody I know would like get angry with you if you brought up One Piece. Like nobody knows what that is. Even in the anime community for a long time, people would harass you for liking One Piece. That's never going to be popular in America. It was just universally like accepted that this medium was never going anywhere here. And it was all just entirely based on this weird like ethno-nationalism, this idea that like, this weird contempt for Japanese culture, which really honestly genuinely makes no sense and never has. Like I have nothing but contempt for that attitude. And honestly, it's probably, I know I don't talk about this a lot, but it probably is a big reason why Nintendo has this reputation that they do, where everybody who's not like a huge Nintendo fan just hates them for no reason. It's just it's based entirely on this racism against the Japanese. Like, people would rather watch like endless reruns of Seinfeld, which, isn't even that funny of a show, than like even ever consider watching an anime like this. Like people don't even know this show exists, and yet it's better than anything that they've ever seen. It's embarrassing, honestly. That's my major takeaway watching this. This show, which I suppose you could argue has a lot of technical problems in that sense, because very little in this happens outside of the bad guys showing up and the good guys fighting them. Like it'd be very easy to argue that the show has no depth and that there's nothing to the core conflict, but I really strongly disagree with that, because this series knows exactly what it wants to do. It knows exactly what it wants to be, and it doesn't bloat it with like unnecessary elements to it. There are no female characters in this. There is no romance subplots or like some big like epic conspiracy. Like it's entirely about the Chojin and their fights with each other, and that to me is very, very interesting, that this show has such a strong focus on what it wants to be. And honestly, I kind of feel like that's why anime kind of excels in that way. That it can actually have so much variety, because you can argue that like, well, what are how much do the Chojin pay in taxes? Like you can argue stuff like that, but like that's not the point. Like that's completely missing the point of what this show is trying to be. And in trying to address elements like that, that's what makes that would bog this show down and make it unwatchable and boring, like Game of Thrones. Like that's the reality of this situation, is that this is a very unique, interesting show that excels at what it wants to do and just just kills it all the way through. I'm definitely eagerly awaiting a season 3. I'm not sure if it's been confirmed or not. Again, this is the first time I've in a long time that I've watched an anime while it was still airing. It's like recently I've been watching a lot of '90s shows. The last series I got through was Mobile Fighter G Gundam, which was awesome, by the way. So yeah, like watching this and like being looking forward to the next season. I'm very, very eagerly awaiting what's next for the characters.